I was speaking a few years back with a brilliant business strategist, a guy who had found that if you go into downtown Detroit and other areas around that, what used to be the motor capital of the world, that you can actually buy houses for pennies on the dollar. And when I say pennies on the dollar, I mean you can buy up an entire neighborhood for $100,000. And then he explained to me the strategy that he used to do that and how he made more money on the rundown properties than he made when he rebuilt the houses and sold them. Welcome to Leading Leaders Podcast, 5-minute videos, 5 days a week. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. This guy had a brilliant strategy. His strategy was he went in and bought a house first. And when he bought the house, he went in to rebuild the house. And as he started gutting the house, the local code compliance people came by and said, no, stop. You can't do anything with this house. He said, well, I own this house. I can do whatever I want to do with this house. They said, well, you could, except all these houses built in this neighborhood have one major problem. And maybe they didn't disclose it when they sold it to you. You have to now. It's in the requirements of all real estate agents to disclose things like this. But at the time, he said they didn't tell him that the house had asbestos in the walls. Asbestos, it's really great for stopping fires. And they even used it in brakes, like in your car. Like the brake pads were made of asbestos for a long time. They don't do that anymore. Maybe you've seen the midday or evening or overnight television ads. They're still running, radio and television all over the place, that say, if you or someone you know has mesothelioma, you could be entitled to millions. Well, there's only one cause of mesothelioma. It's a hard word to say, but there's only one cause of it, and that's asbestos in the lungs, which comes from where? Well, people used to put it in the walls of their house, hotels, big office buildings. They were built with asbestos instead of gypsum board because it doesn't burn very well. It made great for brakes because it wouldn't catch on fire, and it was great friction. And so they would make brakes out of it. So you could stop a fire or stop a car. And so it was a really great product until it started killing people. It was a really great product until it started killing people. But that wasn't the sales pitch to get it in the marketplace, was it? So this guy decided, well, if I've got all these houses that I've just bought up for pennies on the dollar, not knowing why they were so cheap, somebody's going to have to take the asbestos out. But rather than look at it as a loss and say, well, it's just going to cost me more money to get rid of them, what he realized is you can't even legally tear them down unless you're a licensed asbestos abatement company. Just a regular old demolition company has to have a special license to tear down a house that has asbestos in it, because you have to capture it like Freon when you destroy it. And so, rather than hiring one, he built one. He built a company to demolish the houses that had asbestos. He made more money demolishing the houses than he made when he built something new on the property and sold it again, because the property values hadn't gone back up. But in some of those areas, he sold them back to the city as parklands. So he would buy up a city block with a whole lot of houses that were filled with asbestos that people had abandoned and nobody wanted them. But they were safe, right? Safe against fire. Somebody made a lot of money building them. Somebody made a lot of money on the people who were living in them. But when the people started getting sick and they all moved out, they just abandoned them. And so they were left over. And the leftover houses got sold for pennies on the dollar. But when they were torn down, the guy who bought them paid himself to tear them down and then sold them at a profit. And the ones that were torn down, a lot of them just became empty lots that they turned into playgrounds and parks and sold back to the city. City didn't want them when they had stuff on them. It was going to cost them money to tear them down. Do you see where I'm going with this? There's a process in that. But the more important thing is the rhetoric. Asbestos. It's great for stopping a fire or stopping a car. And as long as the rhetoric makes it sound fluffy and sales pitchy, that's awesome. I came across a meme yesterday, though, and as I'm reading it, we've heard all of these phrases 1,000 times, and we've heard them both in their extreme positive and their extreme negative. And I just want to share these phrases with you, and then I'll show you where I found it, because it's just a meme that I printed off of Facebook. Anybody can find it. I'm sure it's been shared millions of times, or at least times, dozens, couple, I don't know. On the one side, and I'm not going to tell you the labels on it until I've read them all to you, but on the one side, it says, we want Americans to enjoy fair wages and guaranteed health care. On the one side, it says, we want to end deadly state violence against unarmed black people. On the one side, it says, we trust women to make ethical decisions about their own reproductive health. Are you hearing something in there that maybe this is a little polished? Sugar makes the medicine go down. Asbestos will stop a fire or your car kind of rhetoric. We want to include voices from history that white historians have ignored. We want America to live up to its principles of liberty and justice for all. So that's one list. In fact, that's the list that says at the header, I got to show this to you. At the header, that's called reality. You see that? Reality. So all the phrases I just gave you are labeled as reality. Now, on the back side, because I've just folded the paper in half, it's not complicated science, but on the back side, this one says, we want all Americans to enjoy fair wages and guaranteed income. And on the back side, they say, quote, the left wants to bring communism to the U.S. So this is the way it's sold for reality, but the counter to it is the left wants to bring communism to the U.S. This one, which says, we want to end deadly state violence. This is a big part of this statement, state violence. The implication is that it's the government that's killing people, or the police that are killing people, and that part of the government should be dismantled, or in other words, defunding the police. So I don't think it's hard to read between the lines of the rhetoric in this particular phrase. But on the back it says, quote, they hate police. On the front it says, we trust women to make their own decisions. On the back, they want to kill babies. Again, rhetoric? I mean, I'm probably one of the few people who would say I'm both pro-choice and pro-life. By choice, I mean you have the right to choose, but you should be fully aware of the consequences, because the choice to take a baby's life, whether it's in the womb or out, is still murder. And whether the law claims that it is or not, remember, 11 million people were executed at the hands of Hitler because that was the law. The law permitted killing them. In fact, encouraged killing them. In fact, offered execution for those who were unwilling to see them killed and wanted to protect their lives. Law. Right or wrong? Whole nother project. You have the right to choose to kill your baby. It is absolutely your choice. You also have the right to throw a bucket of nails in the air and stand still and see if they all land on your head. For every choice you make, there are consequences, and that one has enormous consequence. Still your choice. But if this is reality, what they say is that they want to kill babies. Reality, we want to include voices from history that white historians have ignored. Quote, they want to rewrite history. And the last one, of course, we want America to live up to its principles of liberty and justice for all. They hate America. Okay, you've got to work really hard to find the balance in that, but you've also got to work really hard to ignore the over-aggrandized glorification in the rhetoric of the meaning of any of these quote-unquote reality statements. Every one of them are so flowerily defined and described that they have nothing to do with reality. This is the sales pitch. Asbestos will stop a fire, and asbestos will stop your car. Never mind that there will be significant consequences, and the billions, maybe by now with legal fees and destroyed property and destroyed lives and medical bills, trillions of dollars that asbestos brought to the world. Never mind that, it'll stop a fire and it'll stop a car. It will. So would a giant rock. But it's probably not what you want to add to your life. All of these things sound great. These are phenomenal sales pitches. Of course, everyone wants to have fair wages. And we would love the idea of free healthcare if we could just get doctors to work for free and hospitals not to have to pay light bills and no one to have to pay for medical supplies. If that was the way reality worked, then yes, please, fair wages, free healthcare. Love it. Perfect idea. Doesn't work that way. Because I don't know a doctor who's got $200,000 in medical bills and 16 years of education behind them who wants to work for free. Most of them didn't sign up for that. I mean, I guess they could, but they would probably choose a different job. If they can make $15 an hour flipping burgers at McDonald's because that's the fair minimum wage, and why would they want to go be a doctor and have $250,000 in debt and work for free so you can have free health care? Do you understand the mismatch in that reality of logic? The left wants to bring communism to America. By the way, this is a sales pitch for communism in every place it's been tried on the earth, and none of them yet have worked. Interesting. Oh, and by the way, if you defund the police and also give up your guns, who's going to protect you should the government go awry? I'm just saying. I guess you could build a house full of asbestos because it'll stop a fire and a car. I hope as leaders that you are witty enough to identify rhetoric, to understand the difference between a really good sales pitch and the truth, to ask the questions behind the questions that are not being questioned. And how is it that that's continuing to happen and we're not doing anything about it? Because as leaders and influencers, you're not taking the time to answer those questions, or you're just buying the sales pitch without asking about the fine print in the contract, then chances are you're going to end up living an asbestos life with all kinds of unintended consequences that will be seeping into your soul in short order. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.